Hi there, I'm Claudia. Today we're going to start a new series of tutorials based on the proper usage of parentheses in Python. The series is gonna have 3 videos, and each video is going to cover how to use different types of parentheses. The first video will cover how to use standard or round parentheses in Python. The second video is going to cover square brackets, and the third video is going to cover curly braces. If you're just getting started learning Python, you may have already come across the issue of syntax errors. You may even have noticed that parentheses and brackets tend to be one of the leading causes of syntax errors in Python when you're just starting out writing Python code. So I'm hoping that this tutorial is going to be a good introduction for you, and it will clarify how Python parentheses are used properly, what they're used for, so that you never again forget to close a parentheses where needed, or you never again forget to use the right kinds of parentheses. Now, in this particular video, we're going to cover the use of standard parentheses in Python, so those regular round parentheses. For more in-depth tutorials, go ahead and subscribe to our channel below, and also hit that bell so that you get notified when the next video comes out. All right, let's dive in. All right, let's get started. The first type of parentheses that we're going to look at are the standard or round parentheses. The first thing that you can use these parentheses for, and this may perhaps be something that you remember from as early on as grade school, is to establish the order of operations. When we do a mathematical calculation, we can force a certain order of operations by using parentheses. For example, here I have a series of multiplications and the summation. Typically, the multiplication, if I didn't have these parentheses here, the multiplication between 3 and 5 would take precedence. But because I want the summation to take precedence, I put these two operands in between parentheses. So Python knows that I want the sum to be executed first before it gets multiplied by 3 and by 1. So if I run this, what I get is 33, right? 5 plus 6 is 11, times 3 is 33, times 1 is also 33. In addition to establishing the order of operations for numbers, parentheses are also useful if we want to establish the order of operations when using Boolean operators. In this next example here, I have some Boolean operations, and I'm using parentheses to enforce this OR operation to take place before the AND, which would normally be evaluated first. So what ends up happening is that instead of Python evaluating this operation as true and false, and then the result of this or true, instead, Python will go ahead and evaluate what is between parentheses first, false or true, before moving on to evaluate the outer AND. So in this case, false or true is true, and true is also true. Of course, in this particular example, if we didn't use the parentheses, we would be getting the exact same result at the end. But there are operations where we want to compute more complex Boolean equations where using parentheses would indeed change the result. So that's why it's better to be explicit than implicit, which incidentally also happens to be part of Python's Zen. The second thing that standard parentheses are quite useful for in Python is for defining functions. For example, let's take this very simple function called hello. All this function does is print the word hello followed by an exclamation sign. Now, what you'll notice here is that when I define the function hello, even though this function does not take any inputs, I still have to include this open and closed parenthesis here after the word hello, after the function name. The reason why I have to do this is because this is the standard Python syntax convention for defining functions. If I were to ignore this and not include it, I would be getting a syntax error and the function definition would fail. So if we run this, we see the function has simply been defined. If I just call the function name, hello, what I get is simply a function signature, right? I don't actually get the outcome or the output that this hello function is supposed to have, right? I just get the function signature. Which takes us to our third point about how to use standard parentheses. We use these parentheses for calling functions, which is why they're also known as a call operator. What does that mean? Well, let's take the example of the very simple hello function that we defined just 2 cells ago. And let's go ahead and add these parentheses, open and close parens, after the function name. Well, if we do that, we actually get the output of the function hello, which is printing this formatted word followed by the exclamation point. Let's try this again. Let's use a built-in function this time, and we're going to use type. If I try to find out the type of this 5 here that I have between quotes, it's of course type string because of the quotes around it. But notice how this type function also needs the open and closed parentheses around the input for the function in order to function and give us the correct results. So third use for standard parentheses is as a call operator for calling functions. The fourth use of standard parentheses in Python is to create an instance from a class. Let's look at a couple of examples for how we might use parentheses to create an instance of an object from a class. In this first example here, I want to create an instance of a string object using the string constructor. So in order to do that, I define a variable called string where I want to save this resulting object. And I go ahead and call the string constructor str followed by an open parenthesis and a closed parenthesis. Once this is run, you'll notice that there's no output, right? So in order to see what string actually contains, I can run it in this next cell here and see that it contains an empty string. To be expected, right? We just ran the string constructor without any sort of input. So Python just went ahead and gave us an empty string. Let's look at an example for a custom-made class. Let's say that we create the class called Polygon. Very simple class. It just has the init function defined. All this class does is it takes a shape and it defines a polygon. So now the class Polygon has been created, let's try and create an object of type Polygon. I will again store it in a variable, this time just the letter S. And the way I create this object is by calling the name of the class, in this case Polygon, followed by open parentheses, the input that I want to pass to this object constructor, and closed parentheses. Let's see what's in there. Well, what do you know? It's very similar to what we saw over here, right? It's giving me a signature for where this object is stored in memory. This object, which was created, and it's an object of type Polygon, is stored in memory at this address. The fifth way to use standard parentheses in Python is to define a generator. First of all, what is a generator? A generator is a special type of iterator object that helps us avoid loading all of the objects into memory when we need to use a collection or a series of objects. Instead, the generator allows us to go through the objects one by one and use them in our program without needing to load all of them in memory. This comes in handy, right? If you think about it, if you need to, for example, iterate through a billion different values, you may or may not want to store all of those in memory using something like a list, when instead you could be using a generator. Let's see how we can use standard parentheses to define a generator in Python. In this example, we're going to store our generator in the variable num_gen. And to define the generator, we're going to start, of course, with the open parentheses. We're going to end with the closed parentheses. And then in the middle, we have something that looks pretty similar to a list comprehension. For those of you who are familiar with list comprehensions, you might recognize the syntax to be very similar. We want this generator to yield a num times 2 value for each num in range of 10. So what that means is take the range of numbers from 0 to 10 and create the generator with the double of each value in that range. To demonstrate how this generator works, we're going to use a for loop to iterate through the values in the generator. For each value, we're going to go ahead and print it. So if we run this code, you see that the output of the for loop is displayed underneath, one value per row. And what we're getting is exactly the double of each number from 0 to 10, of course, excluding 10, because that's how Python works. And 10 being the end of the range that we requested is not going to be included. So it's going to be the values from 0 through 9, doubled, and then printed inside our for loop. All right, that's all for standard parentheses in Python. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up so that other people can find it too. And while you're at it, just click the subscribe button and the bell so you can be notified when the next video in the series is released. For even more in-depth tutorials like this one, go ahead and also check out our blog at edlitera.com/blog, and that link is also going to be included in the description below. Thanks for watching and see you next time.